I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Lindy Zias Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Welcome to Ask Arcane Mark, where you can ask your two Arcane Mark hosts all of your questions, and we will answer them, although we may not answer them in the way that you want us to answer them, depending on what the questions are. If the question is like an NDA information or like asking for an official ruling when you can only really not get official rulings from one person, they come from entire teams. Not even Linda, the overleshy of narrative, can just ex cathedra make a narrative ruling.
That is true.
That's just not. Linda is not a tyrant leshy.
I am not a tyrant leshy.
She's a collaborative
That's true.
leshy.
That's true. I like collaboration and consensus building. Alrighty. So we have done one of these before, but it's been a while.
Yeah, we may have done two. I can't remember. We've done one that was a while ago, and there may have been one that was a really, really long time ago, but I can't remember.
So I mean, I'm into editing videos for YouTube now, but not all. But a lot of them don't have I haven't edited to include like the title in the long list of videos. So I've generally been pulling from 2021 and earlier, since those are the ones that I did go ahead and name first. But if folks have particular videos they'd like us to see, then please do let me know, and I can dig it up out of the archives and prioritize it next for my uploading. There's the first question. How's it going, Kitchef? Is going really well. Yesterday we got the last of the Gen Con scenarios into the uploader machine.
Yay!
So that is set. You may have also seen that there are some job postings on Paizo.com. This is a very topical thing. If you're watching this not today, that if you're watching this like a week or so from now, then that may not still be the case. But for a Starfinder and a Pathfinder developer,
you never know. They tend to stay up for more than like a week, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like, people are watching this particularly on YouTube or whatever.
Oh, yeah, but if you're watching it on YouTube, absolutely not.
I can't guarantee we have...
unless it's another opening that just happened to open right when I'm on YouTube.
My inbox, my inbox is full of emails that have been forwarded from HR of job applicants. So awesome. we have a large pool, but if you want... But that does not mean you shouldn't throw your name in the ring if you are interested.
That's fantastic.
I'm excited about that.
Do they usually close until like after the final before the final decision has been made?
Yeah, I just don't know how long it's going to be up there.
That's a good point.
Like, I'm encouraging people to go sooner rather than later.
You should definitely go sooner. Just no matter what, you always want to go sooner, assuming that you like have something written. Mm-hmm. Like, obviously, don't rush it and not like fully fill it out right. But still, my expectation with literally no inside information about timing related things is that in 1 week it'll probably still be open. Don't trust me though, because I have no insider information about those things. I just think that like at least the posting will be open, but it may not be in your best interest to wait that long regardless. Mm-hmm. All right.
So how's it going for you?
Well, I mean, as I said in the opening, but which YouTube people haven't seen, so I'm going to say it again. Mm-hmm. We've got a big Kickstarter that is going to launch on Tuesday. So that's very exciting, especially since it is not one of those enormous Kickstarters that's like, this is like an entire year's work, at least, to do all of these multiple books, but it's instead one book, which we have mostly sorted out already. So by the time the Kickstarter is over and then charges everybody and like figures out who's supposed to get it, it'll be September or something by then. And we should have the book done with the PDF by then. Because stretch goals are going to basically not add ginormous things that require tons of new design and work, since that would make it take longer, but instead going to add some cool things that we're going to do even without stretch goals. Like we're going to let anyone who backs it pitch an island idea to add to the island chain that's in the Kickstarter, and we'll take the best ones even if you only backed at the lowest tier, and that the one that's like just the PDF, and we'll put those in there, and it'll be written by Mark Seifter, whoever that
that
is.
guy?
I don't know. But some of the stretch goals are to like take more islands and put them in, so it raises your chances of getting your island in there, and it expands the book, but not in a way that's like this is months of additional work from these stretch goals.
So we're also getting near the end of our like bureaucratic transfer things over to Maryland checklist. So I actually had a non-painful appointment at the DMV where my name was called immediately.
It was shocking.
It was shocking, yeah. Like Maryland, they had appointments only, so I was home within 40 minutes after the start of my appointment, even including driving out there, and it was ridiculous. So,
yeah, that was
I
intense.
was expecting like I'm gonna be there for hours, or like they're not gonna accept my paperwork or whatever, and it was a relief.
So Dalvin asked how many backer islands are going to be in there, or does it depend on the stretch goals? So it depends on the stretch goals, and so there's at least one like super high tier where it's just like, no, you'll talk with us, and like as long as it's not Bodie McBoatface, you are going to get an island in. We can keep asking you for islands until you give us one that we will put in, but like you will get one in. There's only a few of those. Whereas most of the islands, I think, are going to be chosen just from everybody pitching islands, and we take only the best ones, and then stretch goals are going to increase that. So it'll depend on the in stretch goals. And Rico says, Isla McIslantyre. And Kitchef says the MVA is surprisingly good and used to be terrible. Yeah,
this is my first visit in years, so...
Yeah, the last time I was there, it was absolutely terrible.
So one of your players is playing a character with two personalities pitted against each other in control, building the second one, and gave it a read lips as a way for it to get information while seemingly doing nothing. I like the feat. Awesome.
It's about the read lips feat, which people were talking about from when we were muted before we did the YouTube introduction. So yeah, I guess that's how it's going. So obviously things always get more intense when a Kickstarter is happening, and there's going to be a Kickstarter and an active playtest going on at the same time. So that's going to be pretty well.
How have things been going with that playtest?
Oh, they've been going really well so far. There's been a lot of good feedback and things that people liked, things that people want to see tweaked, and I've made a lot of notes on that, and it's going to be interesting. I'm very excited about the Elemental Avatar. I want to do like a group that has like a kineticist, because they're kind of more of like a martial-ish blaster with that just, you know, can spam one action blasts and also repeat their impulses. And an elemental avatar, because they're kind of more of a rotational castery type, even though they're still roughly at will, but they have to rotate out. They can't just spam the same thing. They don't have like a strikey option. And then like an elementalist, actual spellcaster, and just do like team elements.
Well, couldn't you also have like an Eldamon trainer and elemental avatar in the same team, and like the avatar is more about like I'm specializing in my thing, and then the Eldamon trainer is more about like I'm the switch person who brings
me your fourth person is an
Yeah.
Eldamon trainer. So you have the elementalist, who I would probably go primal to make sure I get pick up some of the fact that I'm the only spellcaster, although maybe not. Maybe Arcane. Arcane does have a lot of spells. I would look into it. It may depend on if the kineticist was doing something that healed a lot, and because I wouldn't want the Eldamon trainer to always have to put in life, and the avatar's probably not going life. Maybe if someone went medic archetype also, then I would be more Arcane, because like if it's your only spellcaster and you go primal, you can get the healing and some of the other, or no, wait, I guess it doesn't matter which one I went, because I went Elementalist archetype, so I'm using the Elementalist
You're
list.
using that list, yeah, anyway. So, but I could also see, like, having your fourth person be, like, a druid who takes, like, more of the, like, elementally spells in their set.
That's true.
Is, like,
But the Elementalist archetype is pretty cool for that party, though.
Yeah,
so
but I mean, if you didn't have both an Eldamon trainer and a...
That's true. But the Elementals can be a druid.
It could.
That's one of the classes that can pull it off.
That's true.
So there's a lot of good choices for Team Elemental Team. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. I also have 2 campaigns that are like starting up or have started. I really need to find time to prep Strength of Thousands now that my group has finally, except for one person, built all of their character info so that I can do like the story-wise narrative prep that I want to do and possibly create new students to add to the roster. I will need time to do that, which I have not had. And my Jewels Indigo Isles game has started, but we still have only done one session, or actually really like a third of a session, because it was kind of like mostly a second session 0.
Yeah.
And then we did like a third of a session at the end of actually playing it. And it worked well in that third of a session, but I'd like to do more.
It still felt like we got a lot done.
Yeah.
Even though it was a third of a session, because we were in because it went like really smoothly, and we went and we explored different places, and we got lots of rewards, and it was satisfying.
Yeah, I think that you guys definitely, and there was a lot of good role play and learning about each other's characters. So Dalvin, the answer to your question is none of the above.
Yes, right. The question was face-to-face or a VTT?
Face-to-face game or a VTT. And so it was online but without a VTT.
Yeah, so we did, so our home group usually does Theater of the Mind, so we use Discord, and we use them, so we'll just have like the Discord video call, or usually even honestly just the voice call, but you could do video if you want. And then we have different channels for our home group's different campaigns. So then that'll be the channel where you put like the pictures or like your thoughts and questions, or like you put in your initiative rolls or things like that.
Yes. So Silver Knight is wondering how we prep a campaign and what tools we use to keep things organized. It varies a lot between the two of us, and from campaign to campaign. From the extreme end, which was Linda's like Uber spreadsheet for Kingmaker that had possibly as many as 1,000 hours put into updating it, but that it would auto-calculate multiple settlements towards a kingdom with
I know I took
rules.
There was someone who, I'm forgetting who it was online,
who created a deluxe spreadsheet.
And I took that, and then I modified it to have my new rules. And then added more things so that
it had all of the legendary games, kingdom stuff that was added in. It calculated command DCs based on Linda's new formulas that were actually still easy enough that we could make them, but wouldn't be like you're adding plus 700 against a DC of 30. And whoa, we became super blurry suddenly.
Yeah, let's
hold on. No, here's what you do.
Oh yes, thank you.
Yeah, don't futz with it. That's how you fix it.
Okay, thank you.
That is weird that the camera did that. Thank you for
letting us know.
Outro, so we could fix it quickly. So that is on the extreme end.
So
Linda doesn't do that most of the time.
My usual would be like nowadays when don't have like a million extra time, is that I organize campaigns with Google Docs. So I have so for example, for a game that I have with Mark, I have 2 different Google Docs, one that's like my GM notes and one that's like the publicly available things. And just for my characters in general, I like using Google Docs. And then I'll be like, okay, I've got my character sheet, and then I've got my extra information down below. I use our home group uses spreadsheets usually for treasure. So we have a Google sheet that we'll have. It's like, oh yeah, here's our Hell's Rebels treasury, and then everybody can access it and move around and use things that way. I also will sometimes have notepad files for like smaller thoughts, and then organize things into folders and things like that. So I haven't really gotten into using some of the more like advanced campaign builder or software tools. I typically just use Google Docs, Sheets, etc. for putting things together nowadays. And then we have a campaign wiki as well.
Yeah, but those are usually less of like
that's less
prep
about organizing
tools and more about
like giving
hopefully
information.
the players will read this.
Hopefully the players will read this, yeah. But more for prep tools, yeah, I would say it's.
I'm actually more similar to when Linda doesn't have as much prep time. I just don't have as much in my Google Docs and WordPad files as her Google Docs and WordPad files. But yeah, I'll have like a Google Doc or a WordPad file with like 50 words in it or something like that that tell me what I wanted to say, so that when I look at them, I'll be like, oh yeah, that's the thing that I'm supposed to remember.
I'll also have sometimes with campaigns things like a list of generic NPC names that I can use to throw in there if the PCs meet someone random after the whole thing where we round up with Bob the guard being a significant NPC and Kingmaker, just because I was like, oh, they would just ask the name of a random guard and I said Bob. Or Thaddeus A. Bard.
Thaddeus A. Bard.
In Council
Look, Thaddeus A. Bard was a very important bard.
I do try to have some names on hand for NPCs.
So, like, I had a prep file for Romp Through Rumplank, which was the adventure that I ran at PaizoCon, not this past PaizoCon, which was all virtual, but the hybrid one before that. And what I had for the prep for that was Romp Through Rumplank, Gutted Snake, Molo Makesig Dogador, Demarty Tixaba, Lawful Neutral, Gender Fluid, Gamayan Ranger 1, a tenacious but woefully adept jungle explorer of some repute. Iron Eel's First Mate, Squotin Malardy, Tavern Brawl, Old Woody, Crawling Caves, Silk-tailed Beetle, Parrot Bear Smugglers. So that's what I wrote in my prep WordPad file.
I tend to write, I'll tend to have like names for NPCs that I know that I'm going to use. And if I'm running off of a published adventure, like what kinds of things I'm going to plan to change off of that. If I have something that I want like a character to give like a impactful monologue or speech or something like that, or have like a really significant moment, then I'll spend time like drafting up the phrasing of how the character might say things, and I've even practiced like giving it in advance before the session so that I can be like, all right, yeah, I know this is how I want this to come together. It really depends on how much time I have too, but I think that for me, it's more about like thinking about it in advance and then making the kinds of notes that are going to cue me to be able to do it. And then the more complicated it is, the more that I'll like prep in advance. Another thing that I'll do is like, if there are things that I know will require me to flip back and forth a lot. So like, for example, in Pathfinder First Edition, magic items, like, okay, what's the caster level of the magic item so that I know if people are going to correctly identify it or that kind of thing. So like,
right, because you need to know if it was a moderate or strong aura.
So making sure that I know like that if the information's not there, like what are the DCs going to be associated with these kinds of things that I know I'm not going to remember easily, that I'd have to then be flipping back and forth to save myself time.
I usually just open a lot of tabs of Archives of Nethys for that. So, and Kitchef in chat suggests using Notion for this because it's a productivity software.
Oh, cool, yeah. But I use, I also just use Google Docs for like my usual life to stuff. I have a Google Doc called This Week, which is not just this week. It's like everything that I know that I need to do for like this week and the next week and then the next month and things like that. And it's kind of, I consider it like, I call it like my extended brain. That's like, all right, this way, if I have a note of something I need to remember, it's organized by week and then by day in the next week.
If someone hacks that Google Doc, they'll hack Linda's brain. And Linda will be like, what? Why did I put that I'm supposed to, like, send all my money to a Nigerian prince on this? That's weird, but I guess I thought so I'll do it.
I was supposed to do that or whatever. So it's like, all right, yeah, here's the task that we need to do for this thing or that thing or that sort of thing. So I do really like that. It's just kind of an extension of how I manage stuff in my life. I use that instead of a calendar as well.
Silver Knight has a ton of Archives of Nethys tabs, just like me.
Yes.
For their Kingmaker game. Absolutely.
I mean, windows full of Archives of Nethys tabs are definitely a thing that you're often like, oh, I don't need this window full of Archives of Nethys tabs anymore. It's a very, very good website.
Yep, absolutely. So just like a window, and it's just like all the Archives of Nethys tabs, I can just tab to each one. It's much easier to use that than... I find then even just having the book, because it's just like a bit able to flip immediately to exactly what I want.
Like when I was running a lot of Pathfinder Society in person, I would just like literally physically print off the copies and then just use pencil to write in the margins, those kinds of things that I would otherwise have to look up. And then, I would sometimes have like two copies working at once, where I'd have a PDF on my computer and then the print copy, so that I could have two as sort of my on my laptop, so it's sort of like a dual monitor, but like one of them is actually paper.
Yeah. Silver Knight also suggests Obsidian notes with internal links to reduce Archives tab. And Rico says PF2 Easy Tool for some stuff and Archives of Nethys for others. I tend to use PF2 Easy Tool when Archives of Nethys is being slow. Just because I find that Easy Tool, if you know exactly what you want to look up by name and it's like a single rules element, it's great. It's super fast. You can get it immediately, and you can see it exactly in the way that it appeared, whereas Archives of Nethys sometimes rearranges things in, like, the, quote, the wrong order, which probably doesn't matter for you if you're not a game designer, but does matter for me, because it's like, whoa, cost is up there. That's not where it's supposed to go. And so, but Archives of Nethys is better for just about anything other than that, because no, not that the Archives of Nethys search always finds what I want it to find, but Google searching Archives of Nethys, using Google, finds things I want to find with by far the highest chance, whereas Google searching Easy Tool does not work as far as I know, or at least maybe I'm just not doing it right. So it's easier to search by not using either of their search, but using the Google search on Nethys, and it's easier to browse on Nethys. But if you know exactly the name of what you want, like Rico said, a feat or a single spell or something like that, you will get it, and it looks exactly like it would have before. So,
Easy Tool also helpful when you need to show a player a dragon related.
Yes. Okay, so that's the other time, which is one of my players in Jewel of the Indigo is playing a dragon. And so I was like, you can go on to PF2 Easy to see the dragon. Although apparently Draconic Die Hard class archetype isn't in there, because I did need to give her that class archetype a few times. Faceless Man says, make a quick meme response to someone making a Princess Bride reference. So that's a good example too. Like I said, my main use case for PF2 Easy, when I use it by far the most, is when Nethys is being slow. So if you want to do it quickly when that's happening, then you should use PF2 Easy. But like, also, honestly, you can use either of them whenever you want, depending on how you like it. It's just my preferences usually to use Nethys because it's well indexed on Google, so you can use Google search for it.
And then of course there's the actual books and PDFs as well. I find like for the main my thing that I'm constantly
I love reading the books.
Yeah.
That's what I want the books for. When I just want to read it, I want to read the books. And when I want to find something that I know is in the book, but I don't know what it is, then I flip through the book, because I don't find either of those two sites to be a good way to be like, I know it's in this book, but I don't know what it is. You can sort of do it with Nethys, but not really as much with Easy Tool by doing certain things where it's just got a list of the name of everything that's in the book.
Well, my Game Mastery Guide is the physical book that I reference the most, definitely, because it's like, okay, yeah, I know where this is in the tools chapter, so I'm just going to flip over to this thing and
I used to do that
through it, because I have like the order of everything memorized.
I used to do that a lot for creatures, but now I kind of use the RPG Superstar tool for creature building a lot on that, because it has some of those numbers sort of preloaded in, which helps because they're like all there on the page, and I don't have to flip between pages. But it is true that one is easy to use on the Game Mastery Guide itself. Nethys is pretty easy to use too for that. Those are both good.
Oh,
Sumatra
for PDF reopens the 12 plus PDFs you leave open.
Foxit Reader also opens have my 12 plus PDFs that are open as well, that are always like a mix of like game PDFs and like tax forms.
Yeah,
that's just like,
it's your life, right?
That's my life. It'll be like, okay, so yeah, I've got like Rage of Elements
and also taxes.
I've got Rage of Elements and also 941.
Yes.
Silver Knight says Hexploration always open in Nethys or Game Mastery Guide because you're running Kingmaker 2e. That makes perfect sense to me.
Nice.
Yep. So if anyone has any other questions for us, feel free to ask. We're riffing off of this question about like prep and prep tools and things we do for prep. I'm generally a pretty improvisational GM, but There's certain things that I like to prep, and I want to have time to prep those. And in the Kids Strength of Thousands, that is like making up names, personalities, and special effects for more students, because the students have those already that are in there. But I want to make sure that I have students that will be compelling for my my PCs, and my PCs might not like sync up with all the students that were already in there. So that's something where I'm probably not going to just invent a ton of students right on the fly because of how many elements are included in each one. Even someone who's improvisational like me, when I'm doing like an orientation with lots of students or a big party where you have to meet a bunch of nobles at it or something like that, that's the kind of thing that even I would prep a decent amount.
I like to make sure I have like the plot structure and the key NPCs and know like how they are disposed toward each other. So like who might wind up becoming an ally with whom, and if there's a mystery, definitely like exactly what happened. Because I find if you try to improvise some of that stuff, you might run into contradictions or be like stuck being like, oh crap, how do I fit all these pieces together?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And there may be a possibility that you decide you're going along and you come up with something that's cooler, like maybe it's something that a player suggested and you decide you want them to be right. But if you have a clear through line that you know, and maybe some places where you know there's flexibility, it's much easier to be able to adjust than if you didn't ever have a stable.
That helps for any mystery you have, even like big meta mysteries. Like if you knew the whole time that Aridin was really killed by Bob the Guard from Kingmaker or Shackled City, then you would be able to pivot around it or even change it more easily than if you just didn't know it all and published a lot of things.
Because then you know, okay, what were the implications of Bob the Guard having done this? And what could be other explanations for these weird things with Bob the Guard?
That's what explains why Bob the Guard from Shackled City wasn't part of the Thieves Guild that he directed my character into, is because he was actually a more cosmic entity that killed Aridin in an entirely different campaign setting.
Yes.
And so therefore that explains a lot about why he would lead me into an ambush.
Because he just wanted to see the world burn, and he knew about the Thieves Guild.
He's just a terrible person.
Yes.
But also, like, Aridin was not a great guy himself, so some people would question, like, well, Bob the Guard was not great, but at least he killed Aridin, and some people would be like, no, Bob the Guard is just a villain.
There you go.
Bob the Guard, very important. Also caused the gap. When he told time to go counterclockwise around all of the timeline across infinity before it synced back up to the left instead of just going in the correct direction, it created a giant gap.
And that's where
that's how the gap appeared.
Here you have it. Bob the Guard is responsible for both Aridin's death and the gap.
That's correct. Now you know. Everything.
You got to be careful about those NPCs who have so little narrative impact that the GM doesn't bother giving them a name until the last second. That may be the GM fooling you, and they're actually responsible for.
Silver Knight got a hardcover copy of Shackled City in their AP backlog. I'm sorry, but you'll never see Bob the Guard because that was an improvised character that my GM created to try to get me into an ambush spot by giving me bad directions to the Blue Crater Academy. So it won't be in there. Kitchev asks, what contribution are each of you most proud of?
Oh, gosh.
I'm assuming they mean contribution to, like,
role-playing games. Stuff? Yeah.
And not, like, society as a whole.
What have you done in your entire life that you're most proud of?
Yes.
So, I mean, like, honestly, that third part of Jewel of the Indigo Isles was ridiculous. So, I'm pretty proud of that.
That third part of Jewel of the Indigo Isles is probably one...
It's the biggest project I've taken on, and I'm determined that it will be the biggest project I ever take on.
I would say probably one of the biggest and most complex tasks in terms of a single adventure, and not like a multi-part adventure. I guess it depends also on if you count, like, is the world's largest dungeon just a single adventure, the one where they decided to use every creature from the entire OGL in one giant dungeon. So, like, based on certain definitions, maybe it's not the biggest ever, but in terms of complexity and how many different things were going on, rather than being just one big dungeon, there's a lot going on. it's ginormous.
It was not easy to get that out. So yeah, there's that. I would say like it's hard to top that, honestly.
I think for me, it's obviously Pathfinder Second Edition. Like, and of course, like everything is a collaborative effort. And when we say any of these, it is like that volume of Duel of the Indigo Isles. Like Stephen Glicker did a lot towards outlining it, and then multiple stages of adjustments and feedback, and then I did development on it too. But it's really Linda's work as the author of it. But everything's a team effort. Pathfinder Second Edition, the entire design team wrote it. Together. That was Jason Bowman, Stephen Radney McFarlane, Logan Bonner, and me. But that's not even the end of the story for that, because there were like everybody on many different teams, even not the creative team at Paizo, like play tested, gave feedback. Then there were people who wrote more than you might think. For example, like Liz Liddell, who was an editor at the time, wrote like additional flavor text lines and a bunch of stuff just because we wanted to add flavor text lines, and that seemed like something that somebody else could do. So like you can count their number of words in there as being even higher than you might expect already for an editor to have done by excellent editing, and even to the stage of developmental editing. So they were credited as a developer in there, not because they were like told to do a development pass, but because their editing was very, very detailed and on a more fundamental level than usual for that project. But I still feel most proud of what I did on Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And like I've said this before, but when we were talking about the final core rulebook, not like how many of the brainstorming phases or that went back and forth, which was everybody all around, but the final core rulebook words, when Stephen Randy McFarlane was getting the bestiary freelancers wrangled, Jason Bowman was doing Crypt of the Everflame, and Logan and I together wrote most of those words, like the vast majority of the like the words in the book. And Logan thinks I wrote therefore over half of the words. I think it was slightly less, but regardless, it's a lot of the words that in the final book. And so that was a huge effort to do that, to get to that point. It was like situations where just like it was holiday break and we went back to like flew back to visit Linda's family, and while I was there, like I was on my computer working during the holiday break, just getting spells done. So like I feel proud of the contribution because I know how hard it was and how much work it was.
So I think, from the direction of like what is like the most blood, sweat, and tears, like that I'd say there's that. But it's also, the question is like, doesn't have to be limited to things you've written. I mean, there's also like the work that I did as like as a tutor, and then for a brief time as a teacher, working with students and being able to like help them out and see sort of where they can go and help build their confidence. And there's also like mentoring people, mentoring authors, mentoring new employees at Paizo, and seeing them flourish in their roles and seeing them build their skills. So like I would say that, those sorts of things, while there may not be so directly like, oh, my name is on the cover of this thing, but instead it's, someone else is succeeding, or their name is on the cover of this thing now, or they're flourishing. Like I would say that they're two very different feelings when it's about like the successes of others, or like, one of my first Paizo cons when a teenage girl came up to me and was telling me about like how seeing me doing what I did helped to inspire her. And like I would say that it's hard to choose between the two, because there are different feelings of like
absolutely
feeling proud of how you contributed in that way versus being like I climbed the Mount Everest of writing this thing.
Yeah. And for me, I was also considering, when I was like, I guess it's about writing, I was like, but there's also exactly in the same vein, like my teaching of like AI classes in the giant lecture hall at MIT. Lots of people went through AI like mega recitation like lectures that I was giving. So I obviously helped people there, or like I hope. I mean, they were saying in the feedback that I did, so I hope that I helped them and was not just wasting their time there. But and then also, like, yeah, as at Paizo as well, helping other people to achieve what they wanted to achieve, to protect them from the stresses of all the things that were going on in the situation, and let them just like get stuff done and not burn out. That's very important too.
And then just, more privately, those moments where, like, people are in a personal crisis and they come to me and we talk, and then afterwards I'm able to help them out. Like, that's also a kind of contribution and something that I feel proud of. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, no details there, obviously.
I would say that there's like a third category that's beyond, like, there's like helping other people. There's the things I wrote, and one thing that like may have had a big impact for the RPG industry that was not writing was like, I guess, like the role that I had along with Steven Glicker in Roll for Combat, like during the OGL crisis. There were a lot of things that that we did that like may have had an influence and may have had an impact and may have helped get a good resolution, which is the resolution that happened during there. So like I feel like I was able to contribute to that, which was something that like probably had more ripple effects beyond to a lot of people in the industry. So like that's the kind of thing where it's like, this is something that is like important enough to be like on Wikipedia. Although like Wikipedia does not necessarily want to include Roll for Combat and the list of people who did stuff there, and I'm not sure why. I think it was because
it wasn't in
one of the initial blogs that talked about it didn't mention Roll for Combat as a source, and that was like the source they decided was canonical. But regardless, it's a big thing. So let's see.
Do you read fantasy books?
Yeah, the next question is, do we read fantasy books, other fiction, favorite authors?
Yeah, I would say that mostly I've been mostly recently in terms of reading, I've been reading like light novels on J Novel Club. I read like longer fantasy novels more in the past, but I haven't been doing that as much lately. I've been more like playing video games and reading like really light and fluffy stuff.
I definitely like bigger novels like Sanderson or The Wheel of Time was one I liked to read growing up as well. But, like, yeah, I guess I just haven't read that many other newer, like, big epic fantasy authors. I like the ones that are a little bit more, like, where the characters are nice people if they're supposed to be the protagonists, or, like, they don't have to be nice that per se. I mean, like, they're not like complete jerks.
Yeah.
They're not like terrible, and it's not like it's grim and gritty because the good guys are terrible and everybody's terrible. But that sort of became a trend with A Song of Ice and Fire, which I read the first book of, and the one character that I liked in it died, and then I stopped reading. I really liked Dresden Files, and then like it's in the beginning, and then like eventually it was like, okay, this wasn't as good. I really enjoyed the Stormlight Archives. Yeah, the Stormlight Archives is cool. And
Matt Guy Dave, I read somewhat more recently.
Matt Guy Dave looks like it's also not as grimdark and is also like Sanderson. Like, yeah, for whatever you want to say about different aspects of Sanderson's work, his characters who are good are like definitely like the kind of aspirational good people, even if they have like literally murdered a lot of people and are trying to atone for it or whatever the situation is.
Characters you can root for.
You can root for them and not just be like, I don't care. That's my issue with the grimdarky or just grim and gritty sort of Song of Ice and Fire, is it's just like, I'm supposed to, I guess, care for some of these characters and want them to win, and have other characters that I hate so much that I want to watch them die, but it's just more like, I don't care. Whatever, I don't care about these people. And so that's kind of where I'm at in terms of what authors I like to read. So, let's see. The next question
Teledilocadoras, which part of the math? Okay, so, I should probably answer this first because yours is more like which part did you not work on?
Which part of the math or any other design piece have you two worked when creating Pathfinder 2nd Edition?
So I guess for me, like I would say that I worked on what did you say? Like maybe it was like some of the disease stuff that that had come over from first edition.
I would say that the Pathfinder Unchained disease and poison rules, which I wrote for Pathfinder Unchained, were inspired by your critique of the previous disease and poison system.
Yeah, like that was having that was like one of the things that I feel like we had a conversation about, and it actually
we had a conversation about it, and I knew what your feelings were on that, and so then like because you weren't at Paizo, you were. But and you didn't know what I was doing, but you had just been complaining about it. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I have 2 pages. Let me fix that." Yeah, basically because I had 2 extra pages left over because of something else we had changed. And so like the stages and things like that were based on generally on a discussion of what Linda found to be a problem with Pathfinder 1, which was inherited for 3.0, 3.5 disease and poison rules, where it was just like. You know, they would just be like, take this kind of ability damage, and that would be the only thing that they did. But they couldn't like have interesting stages. Yeah. And like depending on your ability score, they wildly varied on whether or not they mattered or not until they really mattered. And so it was very swingy and not very interesting.
Was there anything else that you would say in terms of like the math or function of the design? I'm trying to think because I know I worked on like I wrote hazards, but that wasn't like
you wrote a lot of the hazards that were in the game mastery guide,
but that was
they
using
already
the existing
existed
mechanics.
From the core
so
rulebook.
like, was there anything else architecturally that you and I talked about extensively at some point, and therefore that was because I wasn't on the design team, and therefore that wasn't my.
I don't think so. I mean, obviously there were small pieces of different feedback that you gave because you heavily play tested, but I would say probably not. So, yeah. If you think of something, then there might be something else.
Yeah, that was the main thing that I was thinking about, that like you and I had a conversation and that had a through line that eventually led to something going in. But Mr. Design Team over here.
So like a lot. Like all 4 of us talked together and helped design together just about everything that was in there. And so it's just like there's so many things that were collaborative efforts that it's really hard to say anything that was just like, this is just me, except for if there were a few things that each of us like had design documents before we even started that were just like a pitch document for why to do a certain thing, why to put a certain thing into the game. And so with me specifically, in my pitch documents that that existed before we started included like heightening spells, which then 5e, which came out like shortly after we wrote the pitch documents, was also doing. So that made it easy enough to have a pitch. And the 4 degrees of success was my like main pitch. There outside like another pitch that of revamping the ability scores a little bit that did not happen. Partially because some of the things that I wanted to do were actually in that case very parallel, already things that people were skeptical about, but then wound up also being parallel to 5e while people were skeptical of it, which was like, now it's just going to look like we did the thing that was in 5e. Although some of them were very different. They were a little weird. So I would say that 4 degrees of success and spell heightening are definitely things that I initially pitched. In terms of the math, which was the other side of the question, I did a lot of math crunching, but other designers did math crunching too. We had all sorts of spreadsheets and other tools to design things. And I want to say that both Logan and Jason had multiple spreadsheets that we used together as well. And so a lot of the overall situations where we would all crunch some spreadsheets And then, especially during the playtest when we kept switching things around, like, Jason might, like, give a particular directive that that he was interested in seeing that one time, and if other people agreed, I would then do the math for it. So, like, for example, one of the times in the middle of the playtest that actually wound up being, I think, some of people's least favorite one, but it happened for a good reason. So Jason was just like, yeah, I see what people are saying about, like, at some levels, they're not going up at the same rate as enemies. Because enemies just go up whenever they want, and PCs go up based on when they, like, get a proficiency or an item. And so that means at some levels where they didn't get a proficiency of the item, the enemies are accelerating. Let's try one that's monotonically increasing. So that wound up being not so good, but we did it. I wrote it out, we put it in the playtest. The problem is that if it's monotonically increasing so that you never have a backwards level, it doesn't allow you to enjoy the spikes where you gain a large advantage. It then slowly goes down and then another spike, which people actually turned out to like. Because the way
having
you
levels
make it,
where you struggle sometimes, and then levels where you feel more awesome, and
right?
Things like
because
that.
Since we knew that the end state wasn't going to be that, like, you just win and everything dies, which you could do if you spiked and then never went down from the spike. Since that's not going to be the end state, then the monotonically increasing basically meant that during that stage of the playtest, the monsters had to, like, sort of shadow follow you. Anytime you got anything, they got something too.
So then, like,
and so you never
you're
got
not
to
actually
feel
better relative to them when it comes to your ultimate.
Or no, I mean, you sometimes were. You would sometimes go up by one, and then you would stay up by one because it was monotonically increasing.
Yeah.
So it would usually be flat, and they would follow you exactly. And then occasionally you'd go up by one when you got a big gain. And so that just felt like a kind of like a treadmill, and didn't let you, like, be like, ooh, wow, I really got a big gain at this time. And so that's an example of one where, you know, I built it out, we tested it out. There was a good reason for that to be the goal, which was that people didn't like when they backslid at all. But it turns out backsliding is something that works better because it's really just backsliding, reverting towards what it should have been, and it lets you get one situation where you just picked up your new toy and are amazing with your new toy. Kind of fitting with the narrative trope that you'll see in, like, comics or, like, shonen manga, where it's like, I have a new power, and now look at this, I'm blasting through everything. And
now things are now there's a new challenge. How will we
these challenges are strong enough that the new power isn't strong enough on them. What should I do? I'll train and get a new power.
Yeah,
It sort of works with that. And so anyway, like, a lot of math crunching and other things like that, I definitely did, but that is not to say that the other designers were not math crunching right along there too. Certainly will. So there's a lot of things, and we all worked on them together. But I can definitively say that heightening and degrees of success were in a design doc that I wrote at the beginning. I mean, that's not to say that heightening might have just been something that other people would have come up with, regardless of the fact that I put it in a design doc. I can comfortably say that 4 degrees of success probably wouldn't be in the game if it weren't for me, just because of the fact that when I pitched it, pretty much everyone else was skeptical. But the great part about Paizo Design Team is, even if they're a little skeptical of something, they knew, and they were right. There's, like, it's a playtest. The only way, if we're just conservative, we don't try something we're a little skeptical of, that we see the advantages but think it will have the drawback. The drawback they were worried about is too much math of having to figure out 4 things so that you had to subtract 10 and it might slow down the game a lot. They're like, but we won't know if we don't test it, so we will test your idea, Mark, which I think is why the Paizo Design Team,
yes.
The Paizo Design Team is awesome. But it was something that I did have to do a little bit of convincing, not a lot, because it wasn't initially like, yeah, we definitely want this. So that's the only thing I can say with certainty, because they were all very creative, excellent designers, and anything I came up with that I didn't have to pitch a little, I could feel like there was a chance they would have just come up with it anyway.
But one thing that you did do, though, definitively that was you, was like the monster parts system for Battles.
Oh, well, sure, but they are asking about the creation of
the second edition.
2E.
Yeah, but I think of that as, I was thinking about it in terms of like, the sort of the traditional system of how wealth goes up relative to the power of monsters and things like that, and then how you broke that out for the...
Well, and because I did do the economy curve for the original for Pathfinder 2 as well, but that was in high consultation with the other designers, what they were looking for, and it would have been definitely different if it weren't like they gave a lot of things of like, let's make it so that there's a middle ground where it's easier to upgrade because it doesn't accelerate as quickly, but just by a little bit. And so, but whereas at the beginning and the end it does, and that's what caused me to create like a piecewise defined function between an absolute value and an ellipse section, which I would not have done in the logarithmic scale. Of course, I would not have done that for the economy if not for the fact that the other designers were pointing out that could be a cool thing to do. So like. There's a lot of working together. I think that it's safe to say that if we didn't have all the people that we had, that it wouldn't be the game that it was, and just lots of various aspects that I could feel my fingerprints on and I can feel that I help with, but everybody worked together.
I was asking for more on that because Telelocadora was talking about, which is awesome, graduating in math next month. And we also have math guy Dave here, so
we do have a lot of math
be
people.
Interested in the little more detail on how that was going. Let's see. I think I saw another question in there.
Yeah, there was another question up a while, so let's see what we have, which is, so this will be a D&D type game, from Noma DZ2K.
What was that?
I'm not sure what that's about.
Scroll above? Oh, is that about, yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Pathfinder 2E is a D&D-ish game, if that's what you're talking about. I'm not sure. If you clarify, we can ask about that. Kitsune Warlock is wondering what the latest released anime that we've watched. Like,
we haven't watched it much.
We haven't watched much since getting here. I mean, we did watch one episode of the latest season of Ruby, which like can start fights on the internet about whether it's an anime, other than the Ice Princesses or whatever it's called, the one that is was made in Japan out of that.
From the last season that we were watching though.
Gosh, I don't remember.
Which ones are which? Oh gosh,
I don't remember. They blend together because a lot of the times it's just like they're kind of a little bit like junk food.
Yeah, the isekais that we watch.
It's just like yeah, because ever since I would say ever since Linda saw the slime one, that she's like finding some of those like junk food isekai for us to watch sometimes in the background. So
I have to look that back up to be like, which ones did we watch 2 months ago versus which ones we watched 2.5 months ago?
I feel like the most recent thing we watched, and the only one we've watched in the last few months, was that one episode.
Was that one episode of Ruby? Yeah, but before that, yeah, I'm trying to remember what was in the most recent season.
I can't remember.
They all blend together.
They're not very memorable. Not very memorable indeed. Silver Knight suggests Tad Williams, A Memory of Song and Thorns, or wait, then Reese said A Memory of Thorn and Bones. I remember when I was really little, and when I was in elementary school, I was reading, like, I read, Terry Brooks and a few other things that maybe people don't usually read in elementary school, and I like those, but A Memory of Thorn and Bone I thought was boring, but that might not
because you were in elementary school.
That might not be true now, because I'm not in elementary school, so maybe could be one that I pick back up. I guess I would have had it still, but that stuff is gone because of the fire. Let's see. So people are saying that the disease was cool, and those hazards that you wrote were interesting and fun, Linda.
Oh, thank you.
And Tella DeLogador remembers me saying that I specifically like history. I mean, I don't dislike history, and there's certain parts of history that I am interested in. You may have been thinking about the time when I said that I don't like World War II history, and I prefer things that are from further back in the last episode of Roll for Combat Live, where Steven or somebody was suggesting something that was, or was saying that I would like Oppenheimer, and Yeah, Steven said I would like Oppenheimer. Jess correctly said that seems like it's too pessimistic for Mark. And I said not only that, but it's also during an era that I just don't like. So have you read anything about Silvia Federici?
She writes about the transition from feudalism to capitalism and let's see, it just scrolled. And witch hunts in that context.
That is interesting. Yeah. I definitely can see, having not read that, the transition from feudalism to capitalism and witch hunts, like, it's very connected to witch hunts due to the fact that witch hunts were in part a way to try to violently redistribute wealth from, like, wealthy widows or other women who happened to have money but were not very politically protected or at least were protected enough that you wouldn't literally just be able to rob them and get away with it. But if you used a witch hunt, then you would be able to get those resources for yourself. And so they were definitely very economically motivated. So I could see how that would become a major thesis for someone. And Dex Starglow says that they love that the afflictions and hazards are more impactful compared to 3.5 and PF1. And you can see the fear in the eyes of some
players,
of the fortitude save. That's what Linda was hoping for in Afflictions.
Is that everyone would care when you're rolling the save, because it matters.
So I tried to write something that matched what Linda wanted for Unchained Afflictions, which went almost directly into Starfinder Afflictions, and then we had like a sort of more iterated version of that as Pathfinder 2 Afflictions as well.
I see another question down here. How important is it as a designer to be reading other systems and keeping up with what other people are designing?
I would say that reading and playing other systems is very useful as a designer, because when you're designing something, just like if you're in doing stuff for computer science, you know, in computer science it's always don't reinvent the wheel, right? Like, so you don't need to come up with something that's already been done, especially if you can find it in a library that your programming language will already do. Why rewrite it? Similarly, if you can see how things work in other systems, you can find components of those systems that would fit for the game that you're trying to design, and you can take that into account. Obviously, that doesn't mean you're going to design the exact same game, but it can be something about that system that you like and that you want to do your own take on it.
It's part of it, too, that, you know, there are some things that, for example, if you only looked at D20 systems, that you might assume this is part of how role-playing games work. But if you play systems that, you know, if you play Fate, if you play Cypher System, if you play all sorts of other, if you play Blades in the Dark, you can see, like, some of these things that might otherwise be considered to be fundamental assumptions of the mechanics or the genre are not, and there are other ways to go about things. There are other ways to prioritize different types of time or different types of challenges.
Yes. And I would say that that can even be useful even if you're only designing D20 games, because like a lot of D20 systems were not very good about failing forward and generally made it so that failing was a blockade to continuation. But if you play enough non-D20 games, you can take and learn tips from those games that can lead you towards failing forward, which at least I tried to do with some of the degrees of success in PF2 and some of the sidebars saying remember to fail forward, where even like a critical failure will sometimes like move the action forward, but with something very bad for you.
Yes.
Instead of just having you stay there. Like if you go to a library, you're not usually going to get a thing that just says, just stay in the library, and you didn't get anything. It'll be just like, you got this, you're supposed to find directions or something. You could have all 4 degrees of success be like, critical success is you found the directions really fast, and you found a weird piece of paper that had like a cryptic clue about what was going to be there. The success is you found the directions. The failure is you got lost in the library for a while and you found the directions, but it took you a day, and that has issues for you down the line. And the critical failure is you found the wrong directions. Yes. Now you went to the wrong place, and what you find there is another encounter.
Yeah.
That is a very negative encounter.
Or like, you know, or it's like you found the directions, but it took you so long that like you caught the attention of these other people, and so now they know you're coming.
I mean, that's possible. Or, I like the wrong place that gives you a negative encounter, but that also has a clue that tells you to the correct place once you do it, or something like that. But the point is, you could come up with that only having played D20 games, but some of these other games are a lot bigger about failing forward.
I was thinking about it more in the context of like organized play, where you may not have time to do like a whole other encounter, but then
you're right about
you
that.
have that kind of thing. But if you have more time, absolutely you can have the critical failure that eventually you get led back onto the path.
100%. And there's some like Burning Wheel, or like, Mouse Guard's the one you ran that was based on Burning Wheel, where like everything is fail forward. So you can learn a lot even to use in D20 games by reading non-D20 games.
I also think that other non-D20 games have some of the more narrative focused ones have really good tools for building characters and coming up with connections between them it's helpful to think in similar ways to that, even when you're building characters for D20 games.
That's right. And if you want more about this topic, there's an entire topic that was called, like, Stop Playing D&D to Get Better at Running D&D or something like that was on Roll for Combat Live. That was mostly about how other systems can give you, like, secret tools and techniques that will make you better at everything. Because you're gaining XP by going out of your comfort zone and doing something that's a harder challenge. Whereas if you just kind of continue your routine, you don't really gain XP from that as a GM or as a game designer. So let's see.
I see a conversation about a shonen variant for like for a one shot. The first time you cast a new spell,
it gains an additional level of heightening to show off how cool it is, and then never again.
Yep.
Also, considering we'll count Ruby, watching one episode of Ruby as the most recent one. And Teledologadora said that I got the general idea of one of the books about the attempt of forcible wealth redistribution.
I've been playing more video games lately than reading and watching TV. I'm in my second playthrough of Fire Emblem Three Houses. I'm playing a game called Lone Fungus. That's a Metroidvania. I just picked up one called Beasts of Maravilla Island, which is like a really chill game of like going around and photographing plants and animals.
Yep. Yeah, Linda's definitely been doing more video games. She'll switch around, and then she'll do a bunch of something else.
Yeah. Well, and you're playing Fire Emblem Engage, but not as much because I'm hogging the Switch.
I mean, that's fine. That's fine. I'm also playing some other things that are on Steam every once in a while. So I'm playing something called Linda played Golden Deer. I played
Golden Deer first, yeah.
But
now I'm on a Black Eagles run.
Yep. I'm playing something called Eterna Noctis, which is a Metroidvania as well. Although I got very annoyed because there was like this giant robot, and I was fighting it, and I was trying to get an achievement for killing it without being hit. And like I had hit it to the point that it was dying, and it did some kind of explosion thing that damaged me as it was dying. So I quit. And then I did not get the achievement. Not only when I came back was it dead and the item that it was supposed to drop was there, but I did not get the achievement not only for beating it without being hit, because it was hit right as it died, but also I didn't get the achievement for beating it at all, and it made me a little bit annoyed. But I'm probably going to go back and keep playing it anyway, especially since I wasn't going to get all the achievements regardless, for that one. Since some of them were like very obnoxious speedrunning things that I don't find interesting at all to try to do. So it is a very interesting Metroidvania in general. I just did not like what they did there.
Silver Knight, did you get the DLC? The DLC levels were so much harder. I was playing through it, and it was like, oh yeah, I'm so used to the end of the game. I was playing on hard, not like maddening mode, but I was like, yeah, I'm so used to winning in these things. And then that was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting my butt kicked. I have to go back and like really think about the strategy of every move.
I'm enjoying that Engage let me play on maddening mode for my first game. I mean, I guess because there's not a new game plus.
Well, if you beat the DLC for Three Houses, it lets you play maddening for your first run because you earned it.
Well, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. But
yeah,
maddening can be fun. Maddening Classic, just for extra ridiculousness.
I don't play on Classic, even though I always like use my rewind so that so the characters don't die.
Linda from previous Fire Emblems learned that she didn't want to play on Classic, but now there's enough rewinds that she could have been playing on Classic, but she doesn't do it anymore.
Yeah, well, I couldn't have done the I I wouldn't have wanted to do the DLC 3 houses on Classic, though, because that was ridiculous.
Looks like Harpy Harp is playing Kingmaker for PF2. It's the best experience they've ever had in many years of playing TRPGs. For a big thank you for laying all the groundwork and making that possible. You're welcome, Harpy Harp.
Kingmaker is really cool.
Yeah, Kingmaker is pretty awesome. And, like, I also helped out a minimal amount on the Kingmaker project as a design lead. I wish I had been able to help out more than I did, but it was a very big project with a very large number of hours that James Jacobs put, like, blood, sweat, tears, and then more blood, sweat, and tears into getting through. And I was scheduled to put 0 hours toward it, but I worked overtime so I could give him some hours of helping on certain aspects of it. And, but just a little. And really, the fact that it is the way that it is now is a testament to how hard he worked to get it that way.
I see Tell is playing a lot of Humankind in Mini Metro while posting podcasts and live stream vids. Oh, Mini Metro. I like Mini Metro. There's never enough triangles for all your circles. It's a fun one.
Elftro says playing with permadeath in those games means playing with no death. I mean, that's correct, Elftro. Yes. I play Classic, and now, in my Fire Emblem runs, and I have not played, let's see, the one I've not played that came out was like the one that was the remake for, I think, Fire Emblem 2 or something like that. Mm-hmm. I maybe should go back and find a system that can play it. But of my Fire Emblem runs, I have had one permadeath. When I was playing on, like, Nightmare plus whatever the highest number of Nightmare is in Shadow Dragon, my permadeath was at the beginning of the game when you have Cain, Abel, and Seth, or whoever the third guy is, and the game is just like, let's learn about permadeath. You're being attacked by 30 people. Mm-hmm. The door will not open until somebody dies. Leave one of these 3 knights to die in this spot.
So you had to.
Yes. And you're expected to lose more people in Shadow Dragon anyway, because you can't even do any of the paralogs if you don't lose people. You can get paralogs with strong, interesting characters that only open when you've lost a certain number of people on your team.
Yes.
And you also get experience for playing them, which I never got because none of the rest of my people died. It was not easy. And in the last level, definitely only was able to do it by virtue of a strategy where I, like, warped Marth, like, through the entire, like, complicated castle up to the dragon and then just killed him. Like, it's just like, I didn't fight anything else in the final level.
Because you were expected to.
Yeah, Alf, I don't like sacrificing either, but Shadow Dragon, even if you're not in Nightmare plus however many, does force you to sacrifice one person near the beginning. And, like, I think in one of the versions of that game, the one that has, like, that's, like, maybe Japan only, that has a self-insert character, the first in the self-insert, actual unit, my unit characters. Mm-hmm. In that one, like, I think there's a paralog that reveals that the person that you sacrificed in the forced sacrifice actually survives, and sticks with you. Or, like, maybe they come back or something happens with them, but it's the Japanese one, so I have not played it. And, Tele de Locadora, you could consider PF2 Kingmaker. It's a very, very fun time. And Malachi Davis has been playing Halls of Torment, a Diablo-inspired Vampire Survivors clone. Great for playing and watching streams. Hey, Vampire Survivors
it's fun.
Vampire Survivors is just, like, weirdly more meditative than most games I've found. Like,
yeah.
You could just kind of do it when you want to, like, empty your mind of
it's like,
other
I'm
things.
just going to squish monsters
and
by
all
the
these
hundreds.
Monsters are going to die on the screen.
Yes, here we go. Now we're doing our... once you get used to it, it's like, okay, yes, what's the item that I need to upgrade my whip from the whip into the blood whip and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there
Whatever
you go.
it was called, the one that did the
Oh yeah, the one that combined
roads,
the first whip and the second whip.
Yeah, and then you have
Was it like the
axes
Sacroventi?
Yeah, I think so, something like that. And then you have the axes that turn into the sickles, and then you make your projectiles giant, and then you just turn the entire field into death.
That's right.
Yes, it's satisfying.
And Telelocodorus mentions XCOM 2's soft death mechanic, where soldiers get captured. Instead of dying, you can rescue them weeks or months later.
Yes. I prefer that sort of thing.
Then you can save them. Yep. So, does anyone have any other questions for us? If not, then while we didn't answer that many distinct questions, we had very cool discussions for almost all of the questions that I definitely enjoyed. Let's see if there's... Vampire Survivors Co-op is coming soon.
Ooh.
That sounds like it could be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, imagine the chaos with having two people.
Yeah.
And, like, what could they put out there for you to fight that you would even need two people in order to win?
I mean, they could escalate the number of creatures faster. So
yeah, but sometimes the entire screen is filled with creatures.
And then you defeat them all, yeah.
And you kill them
anyway.
Well,
maybe you have to share which power-ups you get. So, like, you have to decide who gets what. And so you get power-ups at a slower rate, but you're then trying to make combos.
That could be true, and you can also hold more.
Yeah, you'd be able to hold more, but then you'd be like, oh, well, what are you...
Or unless you could hold less each, unless each of you can only hold half as many so that the single person cannot be as OP.
Yeah.
Lots of possibilities. Plus, of course, there is Pathfinder Gallowspire Survivors.
Yes.
Can't forget about that.
Is that going to have co-op, do you know?
Probably not, but who knows?
If it does...
Maybe it will. I didn't see anything that said that it did, and I feel like they would have advertised that, but maybe they will now that Vampire Survivors is doing it. But, like, that will definitely be interesting, especially since that's the game that Rico the Bold, like, accidentally guessed when he was like, I would play a Tar-Baphon-themed Vampire Survivors. Mm-hmm. And that was, like, literally one of the games.
Yeah. And I saw that. I'm just like,
Harvey Harp wonders for one last question. It's been half a year since the OGL disaster. Do you feel like it's mostly blown over? The orc winds are still blowing strong. I feel like that it was a disruption event. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it got a lot of people looking into other RPGs that are out there who had never looked at them before.
Yeah.
You can even see in the microcosm of, like, YouTubers that a lot of them are also, that used to be, like, only talking about D&D because that's the one that most people play, that get you the most views, are still doing some other game systems sometimes and D&D other times.
And also because the orc is not tied to a specific rule set, it's flexibility and adaptivity for other games. I think we're going to see a lot of potential for other game systems to see expansions through that.
I think that's true.
And to not have to go through the work of figuring out a license because there's just one that's out there, and you can say, oh, we're publishing it at Orc, therefore that just means you can make expansions for our game.
I personally think that at this point, the OGL is probably pretty safe to use, given that everything that was in it is more or less everything for 5e at least that was in it is more or less in Creative Commons. Mm-hmm. So there's really no incentive for Wizards to kick over the OGL since they saw how angry people got and that they at least did in Creative Commons. It's still going to be out there even if they did. So it would be kind of like a move to cut off their own nose to spite their face because it would do literally nothing except for like anger people and possibly force third parties who had physical products to scrap some of their books as the ones who had PDFs just adjusted to use the CC instead of the OGL. Now other people can't use their work since it doesn't have the OGL in the back.
Yeah.
It just makes it less usable for no real reason. Whereas like when they tried to remove it before, even though it was really super sketchy, they did have a reason for it. It was like a pretty corporately evil reason. But yeah. Like you could see okay.
You could see how that could have gotten them more money.
I understand what they wanted to do with that. Whereas now there's no reason for them to do it, but it also makes sense that whether or not there's a reason to do it, like if you're a big enough other person in the space, or as Wizards called it in their own correspondence, competitor, which I didn't even know they considered people in their own space. They said the competitors they were worried about were Disney and other companies that were ginormous, but they also targeted people who were a lot smaller than that.
Yes.
But I can see how if you're Paizo, you don't want to risk it anyway in case their answer is, we don't care about the PR, we just want a spite move that will close you down. And it might hurt us, but it will hurt you more. In the same way that Games Workshop lost their lawsuit about saying that Space Marines could never be used by anyone, but the company that won a Pyrrhic victory, because by the time they had won, they were out of business because there was like an order to stop until the lawsuit was determined, and that was it for them. So, like...
Yeah, so I think,
I think that it makes sense to do the orc out of a preponderance of caution, but that also, like, the OGL can be used, but I think the orc is going to be better for people.
It's more customizable, adaptable, and system neutral, so I think, the orc... the OGL is going to stick around for...
Plus, it's just...
But,
it doesn't have...
The orc is the future.
The orc doesn't have, like... one corporation that has the power to do something with it. Whether or not you say, well, they never will because it really doesn't make sense. We already thought they never would because they couldn't. And they try to do it anyway. So the orc is just going to sit in the Library of Congress where nobody can change it.
The orc had so much of a process of feedback and iteration and discussion from so many different companies about and people, include down to like very small companies and groups who were saying, hey, this is what we need out of a license. So I think that, you have a process like that, you can really distill down to what is it that is going to be in the best interest of expansion and creativity. And, and obviously not everyone agrees on exactly what they want. There are some folks who would have preferred something that was more closed and protected. But openness is really in the spirit of the orc.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy with what it came out with. So
if I was a third-party publisher, which I'm not a publisher, but I'm the only other person in a third-party company where the other person is the publisher, I would probably publish with OGL and orc licenses so that anybody in one of those licenses can connect up. And I think that would work. There's probably some way to try to multi-class Creative Commons and orc, but the worry is when you're using Creative Commons, I think that the one that they have that they used is not share alike, so it doesn't automatically make it so that other people can use your things from Creative Commons, but you have to look into it carefully, and as some people have pointed out, there are enough different Creative Commonses that a lot of people don't know the differences, and they just think, oh, there's one thing called Creative Commons, and it's the one that is share alike. So if you use the Creative Commons one, and you're trying to not be share alike, and you don't want people to use, say, your lore, you're more likely to have someone using it because they think they can, even if it's the license where they can't use it. And then you have to deal with the fact that they did. Whereas if you want them to, like, definitely know that they're not supposed to use it, and so therefore just preemptively not use it, the orc and the OGL are both good on that front because it's publicly understood with the OGL that you don't use the product identity content.
Yes.
Whereas guessing the wrong Creative Commons is not like a nefarious thing. It's just a misinterpretation that could put you into that situation.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, good question. And, of course, we're going to give an elaborate answer.
That's what we do.
That's what we do, but just also just, like, we were on Roll for Combat Live with over 9,000, like, literally, live watchers, Linda wasn't, but I was on it.
He was, yeah.
And,
he and Steven.
We were on there trying to do a watch party for, like, a Wizard's Response on the OGL, which they didn't do, but Steven was hearing from, like, Eric Bona, it's just like, we're about to do the orc. Can you stay on with these over 9,000 people so we can do the orc? Steven's like, can you do it sooner? Well, I don't know if we're going to be able to keep everybody, but we managed to keep everybody, or most of them. And we're just there with thousands of people when orc was announced. And it was awesome because we accidentally did the kind of A/B survey that longitudinal survey people would have loved to do, and that, like, people who set up psychological experiments would have tried to set it up, which we did by accident because somebody just in the chat was like, hey, can we do a survey that's like how many people are considering moving or like play Pathfinder, are considering Pathfinder, or just want to stick with D&D. And then we did that, and it happened to be right before orc.
Yeah.
And then Orc was announced like a few minutes later, and we're like, actually, we're gonna do it again. And so we had like 3,000 or 4,000 people answering the survey, and then again afterwards, and it doubled the number of people. The number it was like went from like 40% to 80%. So the Orc announcement and like just independently, if we assume that they were definitely telling the truth and they are going to check it out. And that it was 4 of the 9,000 answered the survey. If we also assume that they're representative of the survey takers as a whole, or were representative of the people who were watching the stream, that means that over 3,000 people that day
changed their mind.
And decided to give Pathfinder 2 a look. So that was when I said earlier when people were like things that you did that like had an impact. Like that had a pretty big impact. I've never had that many people watching me at the same time, even when we were on the official Gen Con stream doing like I was leading like I think the Advanced Players Guide stream on there was one of the ones I saw that had the most people because that was over 1,000.
Yeah. I remember it was wild just going on there and seeing what the numbers of people were watching.
Oh boy, yeah.
And certainly there were lots of folks at Paizo who were watching that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a big deal. It was a big deal.
Yeah, no, definitely during that time in one of the work chats, the one that's about like news in the industry, people were like, "This is Roll for Combat stream about this."
Well, I can tell that we were able to help like all of the like the D20 OGL related publishers, which includes Paizo, during that time, at least in our own way. Math Guy Dave says that maybe it was that stream that cleaned out the Paizo warehouse of books. It could have contributed.
Part of the story,
It's part of the story. Like, yeah, because you wouldn't think that the Paizo warehouse would intentionally be holding more than 3,000 books, right? And
there you go. It's part of the story.
I mean, maybe it would. But, like, it's not generally a good thing if you have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of books sitting around near like, the mid to end point of a print cycle. Yeah. Even if you were only going to print again in a year, you'd rather have more empty space to put other products and not
not things to be, like, distributed out.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Awesome.
So, we've answered all your questions.
Let's just say goodbye to YouTube.
Let's say bye to YouTube. Bye, YouTube.
Bye.
See you next time.